This week is a double parsha of Matot-Masei. I'd like to speak about one inyan which is found in the parsha, which is an inyan which is hinted at in a number of places in the Chumash, and it's one that has a tremendous amount of insight and depth and lessons that we can glean for our lives, albeit that it's not practiced in this form in our lives as we have it today. Let's take a look. Torah tells us, source 1, the cities that you shall give to Levites is 6 cities of refuge that you will provide for a murderer to flee there. And in addition to them, you will give 42 cities. So Torah tells us that there were 48 cities that were given to Levi. There were 6 cities that were specifically known as Arei Miklat, cities of refuge. And the 42 other cities of Levi, 48 in total, also served as cities of refuge. And there were halachic differences about paying rent and other differences when a person would flee to any one of those 48 cities, so they would be saved. They would not be chased by the Goel Hadam. Who is this Goel Hadam? Who is this person who would chase them? So Torah tells us that when you came to the cross the Jordan to the land of Canaan, we're now in verse 11 in source 1, you shall designate cities for yourselves, cities of refuge shall they be for you, and a murderer shall flee there, one who takes a life unintentionally. The city shall be for you a refuge and the avenger, so that the murderer will not die until he stands before the assembly of judgment. And the Chumash goes on to tell us that if a person, in the classic case that the Chumash delineates for us, a person is in the forest and their axe, either the top or the handle or the tree, different interpretations, goes flying off in the forest, right? And they're chopping down the tree, and suddenly this branch, the top of the axe, goes flying, and there's a person walking in the forest, and it hits this person and they die. So obviously there was no intent here, and source number 3 goes through the various cases of intentional, unintentional. One can look at that at their own leisure. But in a case where a person had no knowledge that the person was there, it was a totally accidental, so to speak, murder. So the person has to run, the murderer, so to speak, has to run to an Ir Miklat, a city of refuge. And if they leave the city of refuge, then a member of the deceased family has the right to kill this person. They're the Goel Adam, they're the avenger of the blood. And the Chumash goes on to tell us that this person who killed accidentally had to stay in this Ir Miklat, in the city of refuge, whether the 6 designated cities or any of the 42 cities of Levi, until the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, would die, and then they are released. The Torah further tells us, and then we'll raise a number of questions, that when we're talking about setting up these 6 cities, 3, these Arei Miklat, these cities of refuge, 3 was designated for the 2.5 tribes that live on the west bank of the Jordan, and 3.5 were designated for all 9.5 remaining tribes on the east side of the Jordan. So obviously the question of Farshim ask is, it seems to be a little bit disproportional here. For 2.5 tribes, we have 3 specific Arei Miklat, and for 9.5 tribes, we also have 3. So the Ramban discusses this in source number 4, and one of the interpretations given is that the 2.5 tribes had a very long piece of land. So even though there are very few tribes, the land was almost equal in terms of size, and therefore we want a person to be able, almost like in Lahavdil tag, to reach base. So we want to make sure that he has the ability to have such a city nearby, and therefore 3 cities were given to that very large space of land for the 2.5 tribes. But nevertheless, the question still remains. It seems a little odd that 2.5 tribes have 3 cities of refuge, and in fact, our rabbis tell us something very interesting. They tell us in source number 5, Shebegilad Nafshe Rotzchi. it seems on that side of the Yarden there was common to be murderers. And since murder was very common, so they had more cities of refuge. The obvious question on this is, when murderers are very common, those are murderers who are doing it on purpose. When we're talking about a city of refuge, the definition is someone who did it by accident. So, just to tell me the fact that there are more murderers among those 2.5 tribes isn't going to alleviate the problem that we still have murderers by accident. So how do we understand that these 2.5 tribes have the equal amount as the 9.5 tribes? That's one of the questions, will be one of the last questions we'll deal with in Mirz Hashem today. Let's raise a number of more specific questions as well. Why is it specifically that this Rotzeach has to go to an Ir Miklat, a city of Levi? Why were they the ones chosen to be the city of refuge? Second question we need to understand, or really our third question, and why was it that the person was in the Ir Miklat until the Kohen Gadol died, until the high priest died? Why was that the designating factor? And again, there are many answers to all these questions. There's a tremendous amount written